Today, the United States operates as the wealthiest and most highly armed nation on Earth. Its financial markets dictate global trade, and its military projection spans every ocean. This dominance was never an inevitable outcome. For more than a century after European explorers first crossed the Atlantic, North America was largely ignored. It lacked the obvious, easily extracted gold and silver that drew conquerors southward. The prevailing superpowers, Spain and Portugal, drew a line down the middle of the map to divide the non-Christian world between themselves. They claimed everything of perceived value, leaving the northern continent as a frozen afterthought. England waited almost a full century before attempting a colonial foothold. Their first serious attempt at Roanoke ended in total disaster, the entire settlement vanishing mysteriously, while the English were distracted fighting a war with Spain. The early American colonies were struggling, delayed experiments, clinging to the edges of a continent European powers had largely written off as useless. Decades later, the British Empire secured massive swaths of North American territory during the French and Indian War, but drained its treasury in the process. To balance the books, London began levying aggressive taxes on its distant colonists. The colonists, accustomed to operating with a degree of autonomy, rejected the new financial burdens. Disagreement over taxation without political representation rapidly escalated into armed conflict, culminating in a formal Declaration of Independence in 1776. Defeating the British did not magically forge a strong, unified nation. When the dust settled, the newly liberated colonies functioned as 13 independent countries, united only on paper. The national government was a decentralized, failing mess. Facing total collapse, the architects of this fragile state rushed to draft a completely new constitution. They centralized power, established a working federal government, and installed George Washington as the first president to hold the pieces together. Even with a new constitution, the survival of this federal experiment remained precarious. The fledgling nation occupied a narrow strip of the coast, bordered by vast territories still controlled by the British, Spanish, and French empires. Across the Atlantic, Napoleon Bonaparte had seized control of France and set his sights on re-establishing a massive French empire right in America's backyard. The United States relied entirely on the Mississippi River to transport its agricultural goods. The prospect of a hostile French military controlling the port of New Orleans threatened the economic lifeblood of the Western territories. Needing immediate cash for his impending war with Britain, Napoleon abandoned his American ambitions. For $15 million, he sold the entire Louisiana territory. Overnight, the United States doubled in physical size. This new landmass met a pressing demographic need. The American population was doubling every 2 decades. Families averaging 7 children required space, driving thousands of settlers westward into this newly acquired frontier. But this territory was not empty. The relentless push of American settlers resulted in the systemic, violent displacement of the indigenous tribes who had lived there for generations. Ancestral hunting grounds were seized, and native populations were forcibly removed. The Louisiana Purchase set a precedent for the century to follow. Huge swaths of land were acquired through sudden financial deals, followed immediately by the state-sanctioned removal of the indigenous populations living there. Decades later, the Mexican government invited American settlers into its sparsely populated northern territory of Texas. The settlers poured in, vastly outnumbering the locals, and carried the institution of slavery across the border with them. The Texans quickly declared independence. When the United States annexed the new republic, disputes over the border ignited a war with Mexico. The U.S. military victory allowed Washington to purchase the northern half of Mexico, stretching American borders to the Pacific. Every mile of new territory deepened a fracture within the country. Northern states, where slavery was illegal, and southern states, whose agrarian economy relied on enslaved labor, fought over whether these new western states would allow slavery. Decades of political compromises shattered in 1860. The election of Abraham Lincoln signaled to the South that the expansion of slavery was over. In response, southern slave states seceded, tearing the country in half. The resulting Civil War emancipated millions of enslaved people and kept the Union intact, but it exacted a catastrophic toll. Hundreds of thousands of Americans died in the fields of their own country. America's relentless drive for land nearly destroyed the nation from the inside out. Yet, surviving that brutal internal conflict forged a centralized, battle-tested state with undisputed control over a massive continent. Surviving the Civil War did not satisfy Washington's appetite for territory. With the western frontier closing, American ambition turned its gaze across the oceans. In a hasty, late-night negotiation, the Secretary of State agreed to purchase the frozen expanse of Alaska from the Russian Tsar for $7 million. The Pacific presented a deeper moral dilemma. American businessmen had overthrown the Hawaiian monarchy and requested annexation. Washington debated whether taking the islands violated its founding anti-colonial principles, or if it was a necessary defensive move to block rival empires. Strategic self-interest won the debate. By officially annexing Hawaii, the United States discarded its isolationist ideals and stepped onto the world stage as an empire. The final piece of this geopolitical puzzle lay 90 miles off the coast of Florida, where Cuban revolutionaries were fighting for independence against the crumbling Spanish Empire. When an American battleship mysteriously exploded in Havana Harbor, sensationalized newspapers provided Washington the perfect pretext. The U.S. issued an ultimatum, and Spain declared war. The conflict was swift and decisive. The U.S. military dismantled what remained of the Spanish Empire, capturing Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, installing American garrisons across the tropics. President Theodore Roosevelt aggressively modernized this new empire. He built up the second-largest navy on Earth, using heavily armed fleets to intimidate international rivals and secure American economic interests abroad. To maximize this naval dominance, Roosevelt backed a revolution in Colombia, simply to create the newly independent nation of Panama, securing the rights to carve this massive canal through the Central American Isthmus. Opening in 1914, the completed canal connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, allowing the United States Navy to instantly project military power onto two fronts. Over 4 centuries, the small, struggling settlements on the Atlantic coast grew into a continental power that now reached across the Pacific. By the time the world descended into global war, the United States had positioned itself as an unparalleled global superpower.